Get in a comfy seat. Your feet are up or down. Just feel grounded, feel centered. Try to feel the energy flow from your feet to your head and back and around again. Once you feel comfortable, take a glance around the room first. Make sure you feel centered in your surroundings, and then close your eyes. I'm going to ask you to take the deepest breath you will take today. I'm going to ask you to challenge yourself on that and make some noise as you exhale if that feels comfortable. Pay attention to how that feels in your body. Are you expanding your stomach? Are you expanding your chest? Do you feel your diaphragm tingling? Have you not taken a good deep breath in a while? Sit with that for a second. As you're getting attuned to your body again, I want you to pay really close attention to your hands. Start with just your fingertips. I want you to think about, what do the inside of your hands feel like? What does the energy pulsing through feel like? Once you have that awareness from your nails to your fingers to the palms of your hands, see if you can keep that up and run it up through your arms, to your elbows, to your biceps, to your shoulders. Take a moment here, breathe, and spread that feeling, that awareness through your entire body. Feel how your blood reverberates. Remind yourself that we are little electric bodies that run on energy. What does your energy look like today? Is it staticky? Is it fluid? Is it purple? Is it soft? Is it rigid? Are there barriers? If you're finding some roadblocks, some hiccups in your energy flow, I want you to imagine pressing on them like a bruise. Take a deep breath here and release the pressure. Next, while you have this awareness in your body, can you imagine it reaching the walls of your skin a little bit to buzz outside of you? Even if it's just a millimeter, try to push it out through your pores. Through every little cell in your skin, remind yourself that your skin is the largest organ in our bodies. And whether you're sitting 6 inches from someone, 6 feet from someone, 10 feet from someone, don't even pick a specific person, but see if you can transfer your energy to them. And see if you can feel theirs in return. Take a moment here and listen to the breath of your comrades next to you. Feel the stillness in the air. Remind yourself that oxygen is the life force, and though we can't see it, it is all around us. Pay attention to the water cells in your body. Remind yourself that water is fluid. Remind yourself that water can seep out of you and find the nooks and crannies and everywhere that it needs to be. And that you can indeed transfer your energy elsewhere. and to the people next to you. Take a deep breath here. Now this is the part you really have to entertain me, and I'm going to ask you to keep your eyes closed. As a collective, and I am not going to lead this, you will have no instruction or start point. I want you to decide and determine and carefully choose a clap together and try to be in unison. Again, no one is going to lead this. Feel the energy in the room and make it happen. Now, one more deep breath. On the exhale, try again with as much energy as you can. When you're ready, slowly blink your eyes awake. Be present, remind yourself you are here for this little allotted amount of time. You have nowhere to be, nothing to do, and I know that's not true, but we're going to pretend that it is. Okay.
Just notice the disco ball.
Oh, that's a sign.
Sangha has a disco ball for our stage. It's this big, exactly looks like that. So her presence is felt. One of our collaborators who's not here with us today has a little disco ball set piece.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
You're welcome. How's everyone feeling? Good?
Great.
Okay. So I hope that little exercise, first of all, did anyone see the show last night? Can we get some hands? Okay, lovely. I hope that exercise can give you even an inkling of the intense, intentional, fluid, energetic, careful, beautiful, reckless energy that this amazing group carries with each other on stage, whether they are back to back or levels apart. And that is kind of where I want to open today. Their process as a collective is deeply collaborative, and the piece itself is based in this ongoing, fluid relationship that they daily have together. And I would love to open up the floor for you all to talk about a little bit more of the process of creating and translating this loving relationship that you have with each other and how it translates on stage into this performance. Do you have any thoughts on that to start with?
Thank you, Raneem. And thank you again so much for that opening, grounding experience. And for me, I was thinking and feeling a lot about home in that experience that we had. Oftentimes we hope that our bodies can be a home for ourselves, a place in which we can feel safe and we can plan. In many ways, this project and this group of people with Sangha, who is not able to be with us in person, but clearly We feel the presence. And growing in Joshua, and now, this community expanding with our other collaborators that are involved in the show, and the amazing production crew and team at TTT. So this group has really been a home for me. We've been working together for a little over 3.5 years. So Senga first brought us together in Colorado Springs, where she's based. And in her typical Senga way, we had this fleeting idea. We had met separately before, different times, different places, all of us. And you know how when you meet artists, you're like, oh, we should collaborate, we should do something together. Then 99.9% of the time never happens. Not because you don't want to, but it's, life is complicated. But Senga, in her way, once she decides that she needs to go in a direction, she just starts walking. And so she started walking and brought us all together. And we had an initial residency at Colorado College, and then since then, we've been meeting for a week at a time, and then a week 6 months later, and 2 weeks a year later, for the past 3.5 years. And here too, we met here just before the pandemic in March of 2020. Yes, thanks to Drew and the Contemporary Center. So that's a long context to say that from the beginning, we didn't have an idea of a piece that we wanted to do. We didn't know even what concepts or stories we wanted to explore, or if it was going to be a performance at all. Everything was so up in the air.
But can I say that we played a lot? We played a lot.
We played a lot.
IJS.
And exactly, like from the beginning, what was most important was creating a space within our group and within our relationships where each of us could feel as free as possible and supported and cared for, and able to explore and experiment with different mediums and practices that maybe we haven't had a chance to before. And I'll just speak from me personally. Before I met these folks, I had only dreamed within a dream of dancing. I never thought I could be a dancer. And it was, meeting Crow and with her friendship and mentorship and guidance, and Senga and her incredible movement practice that really inspired me and pushed me and challenged me to think of myself as someone who could dance and use my body in that way. So it's been an incredible opportunity to be able to explore that part of my practice within this group as well. So that's just to say it. I'll stop talking in 5 sentences now. That's just to say that from the beginning, the priority was always the friendship, prioritizing just the deep love that we have for one another. And we do that in little and big ways, little rituals and big rituals, as you'll see tonight. But what I'm really proud of after this sprawling 3.5-year journey is that this piece, in so many ways and on so many levels, seems to be a really honest representation of our what we have together, our relationships, the dynamics. There's a lot of ourselves in it, as translated through stories and mythology and ritual. Would you all like to add?
I think one of the really interesting things about the way that the process developed was that we all, Crow and I have worked together since we were born, basically. But as a group of the 4 of us, have such different working processes, and finding a way through improvisation, conversation, of like finding a common language was such a big part of the process of making this piece. And especially translating Senga's, so Senga's did at one time have a very active movement practice, but her main career has been focused as a sculptor, and her way of working is very, very in deep relationship with materials, and not predetermined outcomes whatsoever. And a lot of what we did in the early times of this is Senga would make a run to the foam relic store where all the like pieces of foam go to die or are left over or whatever, and she would drag a huge pile of strange shaped things and say, "Crow, what would you do with this? And what if I hung it from the ceiling? And what if we did this?" And then so we would just be like experimenting with all of these different materials and shapes, and sort of separately having conversations, thematic conversations, and mythological conversations, and sort of, I think over time, developed a process of allowing those two seemingly unrelated processes to kind of merge in the sense of, you know, you're speaking over here in concepts and you're speaking over here in ideas, and then over here you're playing in complete intuition and experimentation of materials, and then sort of over time the threads of those two processes start to meld together, and you sort of find the subconscious connections between the imagery of the materials and the images from the conversations, and those two things sort of start merging together until you start seeing the mythologies in the materials. And that was a reminder that Senga gave us quite a bit, was like, just trust in what is speaking to us is going to connect to the thematic ideas. And I think the process worked that way quite a lot, of this sort of like allowing the subconscious to connect from the ideas through the body, through the materials, and allowing those kind of processes to emerge over time, if that makes sense.
Thank you. Thank you. That brings up a lot of thoughts for me on just witnessing your performance and the intention and the theory behind it of world building, both material and metaphysical. And it makes me think a lot about how, you know, the basic physics of energy cannot be created or destroyed. And I would love to hear some thoughts on each of your interpretations on the worlds that you built together in the realm of, it made me think of when you were speaking, Joshua, about the intuiting to these materials in your hands. And while it may be a piece of foam from a junkyard, that piece of foam was once something else, which was once something else, which was once something else, and maybe already in your body, you know. And so I would love to hear a little bit more about the ways that these material energies transfer into your world building. And it also brings up some thoughts, especially at the beginning of the performance. The only thing I could think of, Eddie, from your singing, from the movement, from your searching, was just this deep, deep sense of longing. And I felt that thread throughout the entire performance of longing, seeking, finding, rejoicing. And yeah, if you have thoughts on that, I would love to hear. Thank you. keep asking you all these really open-ended questions.
One thing comes to mind. I'm trying to dig in this last 3.5 years, how we started and what came of it, and trying to contemplate on your question about. I just came to my mind as spirit. There's something that we didn't really talk about, or maybe we did talk about and did a whiteboarding. Like we had this big whiteboard at the Colorado College rehearsal space. Writing all of our ideas and themes and desires. I remember that, I think, several times, and keep defining. But one thing was animism, like honoring beings. We talked about that a little bit, but we all mutually felt this respect for, we call it materials, like, as an artist, but anything, the chair, the coffee cup, the jewelry, the phone that we were using, or this little apricot industrial tape. We felt like they were sacred objects, and we didn't really even say those things, but we, like Senga would bring it to me because she uses these materials that seem so ordinary to everyday life. She says that literally discarded objects. She feels like they're living beings. And I'm from Japan, and we have in ancient, you guys probably know Shinto religion. It's one of the many tribal religions that just came up really like a big thing. But there were many tribal beliefs there 12,000 years ago, not just Shinto, that honored beings and everything that in your everyday human life, it was so honored, and it was never seen as a separate thing. When I was researching, nowadays the science makes what is different between this chair and a human being, or an animal and a human being. But in those days in Japan, it was like, what is not the differences, but the sameness that we have by honoring. And somehow that sort of translated, maybe, Eddie, you being Korean and from the ancient also ancestral honoring of that, and shamanism and beings. I don't know, it just all somehow quietly came together, and we would never really discard anything that was brought to us by Senga, and she would even send them through the mail. And me and Joshua, we would run out into the winter snow, and we'd experiment and putting it into the ocean, and we were so cold, and we were trying, like, pulling it out, we were throwing it around, we put it around our bodies, we were trying to experiment and see what the being wanted to speak. And I felt like we all did that a lot, like just waiting for the materials to be alive and speak to us.
One other thing that comes to mind when you talk about longing is, we talked a lot about sort of ancestry and ancestral lines. Eddie, I don't know if you created the word transcestral lines as well, I don't know. But, okay, well, that's a good one. And I think one of the things that we all share in common, and many people, is sort of this longing or seeking of understanding where our energies are coming from and where our whether it's ancestral energy or those kind of things. And I think we've had all, in this piece, there was a overarching, we're on this journey to understand who we are, we're on this journey to understand where we came from, but we're ultimately going to be left with mystery, to a very large degree. And we're often having to sort of define who we are ourselves and where we belong in our almost redefining what our ancestry is in a certain way. So I think that there's this very common thread of trying to see or feel back those lines and then where they're missing to rebuild them and create new ones. And so in the piece you can sort of see a very continual thread of lines crossing lines.
There's also this beautiful point in the piece where Eddie and Crow, before you finally make physical contact, and the tension being so palpable of wanting you to find each other, and then you finally do. But prior to that, you're crossing your lines, and Eddie, I believe you go off stage for a moment, and Crow, you're treading so carefully in between these lines and following that grid. And towards the end, Eddie, you take freedom over the space and over the stage in what feels like a reclamation. And I would love to hear about the process, and it's okay if this is still in question. It's okay if it will continue to be in question until the day that we end. But it's okay. The process of how do we reclaim that? And it makes me think of a conversation I had with a dear friend who I was expressing some sentiments I won't give the boring context of around this thought of how are my ancestors viewing me. And so I come from my parents are from Jordan, and it's a very, I'm queer and trans, and it is not necessarily compatible with the general consensus of the culture there. And I remember saying to my friend at one point, like, I think I'm hiding from them. I wonder what they would say about me. And my friend said, why, you can't hide, they already see you. It's just a matter of speaking to them. Your ancestors are not just your bloodline, it's the people that contributed to you being here. And that does not equate to blood and born. And I'm curious to hear each of your processes, or whoever would like to share, on seeking ancestry and building it and claiming it and holding it with so much certainty.
You really touched on one of the core threads in our work together and in the piece. We've talked a lot about ancestry and how each of our relationships to family, ancestry lines, is really complicated. Sometimes those lines are obscure, sometimes they're distorted, sometimes they're interrupted by anything from family drama and interpersonal things to genocide and imperialism and war. So oftentimes we look back and there's a lot of mystery. And at the same time, this amazing life that we live and share together, every day I'm so amazed by the practice of friendship and coming together and choosing one's family. And I think we all do this to a certain extent, and I think queer and trans people, we have a particular need and longing for this kind of family, because often, as Raneem mentioned, the relationships we have to family can be quite tenuous sometimes. And so, in the ancient queer practice of choosing one's family, I think we also wanted to explore how do we expand that so that we might choose or claim ancestry that, again, is not defined by blood or biology, these bloodlines, purity of blood, but instead by what we share together, our values, our commitment to one another, our love for one another. And I'll share from a personal standpoint, one of the most empowering and delicious discoveries that I've had recently is this incredible history of Korean trans and queer shamans that were active early 20th century during Japanese occupation and then American military occupation. Incredible, incredible artists and community healers, and organizers, entertainers, doulas, party organizers, just like what trans people have been doing forever, right? And so I'm learning about this history, and I'm like, oh my God, one, queer people have been just doing this for a long time, for a real long time, and in almost exactly the same way. Those shamans were revered and respected and loved and admired, simultaneously while being hated and attacked and persecuted and marginalized and kept from accessing just basic, human resources. And so in a similar way, I see so many parallels to trans and queer experience in contemporary society anywhere in the world. But here in the States, we have this kind of growing representation and admiration for certain celebrities, and same kind of thing with many stories. And at the same time, there's still so much suffering and pain amidst, of course, all of the joy coming together. And so, from a personal perspective, being able to connect with that history and really call on those transcestors to make a connection with me and I to them, I felt kind of for the first time that I could connect to history, that I could connect to a continuum that was larger than myself. And I think in a way our piece is like one big, cumulative ritual. A lot of little rituals coming together to share this big ritual, and we have these coming together of our own personal histories and autobiographies and personal lineages, and we very much kind of in an alchemy bring them together and create one cumulative ancestry, lineage, family that can contain all of us.
I guess for me, one of the personal experiences that really helped me to connect, I basically, my father is a Jew from the Bronx who escaped the Bronx and settled in California, and I was completely separated from that culture growing up. And so I didn't know a lot of the things inside of myself that I had inherited because they didn't have a name, basically. And Crow and I were, with our group, touring in Eastern Europe. We were in Poland, where my father's family came from. And before going there, he had said to me, "Oh my God, you're going to Poland? I would never set foot in that fucking country in my life." And I didn't really understand what the depth of what he was saying. And so when I went there, I was kind of looking around people's faces. I was looking in locations. I was looking for some kind of connection. I just felt literally nothing. I just didn't feel anything at all. I didn't feel anything. But then one day we're driving down the highway and I just burst into tears. I didn't even understand why. And we had to pull over to the side of the road, and I just sat in the dirt and just cried and cried and cried and cried. I couldn't stop. And it just kind of hit me that what I was feeling was an absence, was erasure, and that there was things inside of me that I didn't even understand or know, but there's in a much, much deeper place inside, has a full, authentic, real connection to my ancestry that is in my DNA, that's not even something that is in my conscious mind. And it has really affected me, and it really gave me a place. You talk about that longing. It definitely gave me a perspective on sort of that, the depth of these things that are inside of ourselves, that are beyond logic, beyond, you know. So that gave me an entry point, for sure.
Maybe that's the energy that we carry throughout all of our lives, that even if our parents keep secret, or your grandparents would twerk the story into something else, we still feel the true energy that comes from our minds, and we're just, whether we like it or not, we're carrying it. And I was just thinking that when you said energy you cannot take away, you said this, Raneem, but we can transform that energy, and I've been really feeling that recently, even through our piece. Like, we had a lot of suffering stories that we shared with each other, and traumas, and ancestral secrets maybe that weren't told to us, but we carry it in our body. Maybe Eckhart Tolle would say pain body or something. But yeah, I've been feeling the transforming the energy, the possibility of that.
Thank you for sharing. I think I'm basking in a moment of admiration of sharing ancestry. And yeah, the sense of longing whenever I visited Jordan for the first time, just feeling like, and it's always just a beautiful reminder that home is where you make it, and it doesn't have to be a physical place. And at the beginning of the show, you usher people in and offer bags of sand, and you say, please accept sand from my ancestral lands. Is that right?
The sacred sand from the ancestral land.
Yeah. And the question popped into my head of, oh, whose ancestral lands? And I think the answer is all of ours, right? Yeah, it just made me think of that too. And it also makes me think about, I don't know who said this, but knowledge is a myth until it lives in the body. And did you say that to me once upon a time? I think it's so wise that anytime that somebody says something really good, we think it's coming from her, which it very well could have. But the concept of knowledge is a myth until it lives in the body, and your work is so centered around embodiment. Crow, I just have to give you, well, all of you, the ways that you move relationally to each other, but there's the piece and the performance, and forgive me if I'm getting this wrong with the mythology, but where you're essentially coaxing Eddie's character out and playing with this like massive brown paper construction and crawling in and out, just so stunning. And then there's another movement piece where you are playing these like really clear, glittery like articulations on the guitar and all of these wild instruments that you have, sound creations. And Crow, even I feel like I could feel your fingernails reverberating to every note and the embodiment of it. And I don't know if I had a question with that word, just an admiration to it. But yeah.
Oh, I can answer.
Yeah.
Would you like to know the story?
Oh, please.
Okay. Had any of you read the program, by the way? Okay, got it. Okay, it's a very quick mythology, Japanese mythology. And in this piece, we all play multiple roles, interchanging. And there's a sun goddess that hides into a dark cave. So that's where you saw the paper. The sun goddess was so upset that her violent brother was destroying everything on earth. So she gets so depressed, she shuts herself into the dark cave. And so that is also in mythology, Eddie's mythology, she's also sun goddess, among many things like the shaman. And so there is, all the gods were worried that the entire world was in the complete darkness, so they had to scheme something. And this one crazy entertainer, clowniac dancer, Okame, or Ame no Uzume no Mikoto, she's like this, she revels in sensuality and like a joker and an entertainer. She's lewd and a little bit crazy and animalistic. Pharaoh, before the patriarchal things have told what woman is supposed to be or not, she was this being. And she says, I will learn out the sun goddess with the crazy dance. So the gods and her made this huge festival right outside of the cave door. And then she cleverly placed a bronze mirror right outside. And it had this crazy, crazy festival, like, wow, party. And then, of course, the sun goddess goes, what's going on out there? A lot of fun sounds are going out there. Maybe I'll peek a little sliver. I want to see what's going on. And she peeks. And then the sunlight came out, and then she was peeking even more, and then everybody dragged her out, and she saw her own glorious magnificence in the bronze mirror. And I think everybody relates to this. It's really, each one of us are afraid of our magnificence, and she finally sees it. And so the light was restored in the dark earth. So that's the mythology.
And I just want to add that in the way that I feel like our piece is such an honest representation of who we are, Crow is constantly luring me out. all the time, in such a beautifully, like, sisterly way. Just, you don't have to be perfect, you know, like, you know, be free. And so often I'm like, like this, and just thinking, and Crow, you know, we're always getting to know each other, but now, you know, we're forming deeper and deeper connection, and she's found all of these little ways throughout our time together to really encourage me to come out of my cave and see my own magnificence, and just a moment of real gratitude for that, and also just how funny it is that it's represented so accurately.
Thank you for that. That's so sweet.
Makes me tear up. So I want to be mindful of time and see if we have any questions from the audience.
Is anyone planning on seeing the show tonight? I hope you can. Please join us.
Yeah. There were several points where I cried, and don't let it influence that statement that I cry often. But no, it's an extremely moving, breathtaking, breath-filling collaboration that is truly an honor to witness. And I thank you all for showing up so wholly. And the friend that I was speaking of earlier, one of their tenets for creating spaces is to show up raggedy. And I think it speaks to allowing yourself to revel in the rough drafts and all of their glory, and see the luminescence beyond the rough edges, the unpolished edges. And so I highly encourage, if you weren't planning already, please come see this performance this evening. And give them big thanks and gratitude after the show as well. I have so many other thoughts. I could really talk to you all for days about it, but yeah, if we don't have any questions for now, yes.
Okay, so I got to look at the program and I looked through the lyrics that you sing during the show, and I was really struck by a lot of the beautiful lyrics and how they connect to queerness and all of the ancestry that you're talking about. There was one line that was like, "Your life doesn't have to be such a sweet, sticky secret." And I was just wondering if you have other lines or lyrics that sit with you that you want to share.
I have one. There's a line in one of Sanga's poems that really stuck with me. It has to, and I don't know what her intention was behind the words, but it has to do with can I remember it though? Something like when she turns, when
Oh, sideways?
yeah, when she turns sideways and upside down, and she slips into the unknown with ease and faith to be transformed. That one really.
We did it. We found it. Collaboration, teamwork.
Thank you so much, Gabriel. Crow, are there any lines for you that
It's just too many. I think we can end on that note.
That's a pretty good
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you all for being present.
Thank you.